Hi, everybody. Today's Friday, April 17th, 2026, and our dear friend or brother, Professor Ted Postol, is here with us. Welcome back.
Yeah, it's nice to be here.
Ted, let me start with the latest, news on what is happening between the United States, Iran, and Israel. And here is what we've learned so far. Iran has opened up the Strait of Hormuz. All these commercial vessels can pass through the Strait of Hormuz under the control of Iranian government. They're controlling everything, even the route of the way that the path through which they're going these tankers. On the other hand, we've seen the United States announcing the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. And the latest news is today from the Iranian Tasnim news agency, which is an official, it's so connected with the government in Iran. They said that Iran was prepared to attack Israel last night at 8 p.m. because one of the main conditions before this ceasefire happening between Iran and the United States and Israel was that the war should end on all fronts,
Yes.
and which wasn't the case so far. So Iran said we're going to get back. Then the United States, it was the deadline for the Iranian. They said at 8 p.m. last night, but Donald Trump has announced 8 p.m. Iranian local time in Iran, and Donald Trump has announced the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon at 7 p.m. Iran time. How do you see the situation, Ted? Looking at the chaos, you see some sort of you hear every time you hear Donald Trump, he comes out with something new. And I don't know, we are so tired of these sort of surprises, these sort of unrealistic instability on the part of Donald Trump. What is your understanding when it comes to Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, first of all, let me say that I've been traveling, and some of these details are new to me. Unfortunately, because I've just been so busy, traveling. But uh, the problem that Trump has is that he has started something he has no chance of resolving on favorable terms to himself. I mean, it just boils down to that, and the Iranians are in the driver's seat. In fact, it's interesting that they announced that they would be attacking at 8 o'clock, and at 7, all of a sudden, the Israelis agreed not to continue murdering people in southern Lebanon. That's an interesting result. I don't know how long it will persist. The Israelis are taking a terrible beating from the Iranian drones and ballistic missiles, and the Israelis have controlled the press very efficiently. But every time you get a glimpse under the tent, you find out that there's evidence of very substantial stress in Israeli society, damage, and people are simply not able to function at night. They're in shelters. They can't function during the days because there can be attacks at any time, and there's a large amount of general damage. And it's not like you can't make the place look like Gaza because you can't deliver the incredibly enormous amounts of munitions that the Israelis have been able to deliver over months with aircraft bombing and destroying things on the ground. But there is a lot of damage, and there's enough damage that when an air raid occurs, you are not going to ignore it. I mean, it's not as if a bomb that goes off somewhere in the city and, the odds are very high that you'll not be involved. There's enough damage being done in each raid that you have to take shelter. That, unless you have a death wish, you're going to take shelter. It's just, it's your life, and you're just not going to play with it this way. And so people take shelter, and this completely disrupts every aspect of their lives. And the stress from what I'm able to understand, is beginning to show in the society in general. Now, I assume, I don't know, I assume that this is a source of pressure on Netanyahu. I know that he has been giving speeches saying, just hang on, we'll be fine, we're about to win, that kind of nonsense. Really, it is nonsense. But my guess is people are no longer buying it. And he's looking at, I don't know if you would call it a revolt, but a group, a serious loss in support. He's got an election coming up, and he's probably worried about that. And so this may be influencing his behavior with regard to Lebanon. My guess, and it's only a guess, is that as soon as he feels he's free from some of these pressures, he's going to go back at Lebanon. I mean, he's going to go, and the Iranians are going to do what they have said they will do, which is to renew their attacks on Israel and American military bases in the Gulf. So it would be nice if I'm wrong, but what the Iranians want is unrealistic given the behavior of the United States. It's not unrealistic. It's appropriate in my view. What they want is to be left alone. They want to have these outrageous sanctions, economic sanctions lifted. They want to be able to go about building their society free of being attacked militarily and free of being attacked economically, free of these attacks where the American Secretary of the Treasury is involved with the intelligence organizations to try to devalue their currencies. This is just, if you're Iranian, I can't understand. I mean, I can't understand how you're just totally fed up. And so I think that as soon as the Americans or the Israelis do something that is not consistent with the ceasefire agreement that the Iranians understood was going to happen, which included, of course, that Israel would not be carpet bombing southern Lebanon. As soon as that ends in some way or other, the ceasefire is going to be over. And my expectation is it will be over, unpredictably, but not very long from now. The Iranians can persist. They have the missiles. In fact, in some sense, the ceasefire is, people talk about the ceasefire being good for the Americans because they're resupplying, but they don't have a lot to resupply with. They're running out of weapons to send, let alone, you can resupply, but you have to have the weapons to send. And the Americans are in bad shape. And the Americans are taking weapons out of countries like Japan and South Korea. And this is not a benefit to American alliances, because the Japanese and South Koreans are looking at this and they're saying, you're taking these weapons out because you're trying to defend Israel, and you started this war, and you claim you're defending us, but in fact, you're showing your priorities, and your priorities don't include us in a serious way. I know the South Koreans are very disturbed. They've been disturbed about this for a long time, because I have contacts in South Korea, and I know for a fact that they have been very concerned about the nature of the American commitment to South Korea. And, things are generally moving in the wrong direction for the United States and will continue to do so. So from Iran's point of view, it seems to me that the ceasefire works better for them than it does for the United States, because the pressures of the potential drop in oil supplies is still there, and the Iranians can shut the strait anytime they choose to, and probably they will the moment the ceasefire ends. It's my expectation. I don't see why. I mean, I'm just trying to put myself in the position of the Iranians. You don't.
You're right, because they mentioned that in today. They mentioned that the point that you've just mentioned, that at the end of the ceasefire, everything gonna end. They're gonna close
Yes.
the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah. Why would you give up this lever that you have, given the insincerity of the American and Israeli conduct toward you, and having suffered all of these economic sanctions and military attacks and loss of life? Why would you not just return to a full scale war? Especially because you're the one who's going to benefit most from it. You're going to be able to put the pressure back on, and it's going to be just as bad. In fact, it's going to be worse, because the air defenses have not had any significant capability against the ballistic missiles, but they have had capability against the drones, because the drones are slow moving and they are viable targets. In fact, they're somewhat easier to shoot at, not necessarily, they're somewhat easier to shoot at when you see them than aircraft. They are not necessarily easier to know they're coming, because when they fly low, they have small radar cross sections. I described in the last session we had why, when they're low, the radars have this phenomenon called clutter, which are reflections off the ground and buildings and waves if you're coming in off the water. And those reflections are very large relative to the reflection from the drone. So it's extremely difficult to see these things at long enough range. And by the time you see them, it's also very difficult to bring to bear interceptors. And of course, now that you're running out of interceptors, there's nothing, you don't have any resources to use to stop these drones. And they're getting better all the time. They now have two-way communication that's unimpeded. So you can literally have a person sitting in Iran seeing exactly what the drone television camera on the drone sees, and guiding the drone in real time. I mean, this extra communications capability is now built into probably all of the more modernized drones. And, when you have that capability, you can do damage to anything you choose. And you don't have as big a warhead, but it doesn't matter, because if you can hit exactly where you want to, the damage from the warhead can be amplified. And if you want to do larger areas of damage, so you have several drones come in. And since you know where the damage occurred with the earlier drones, you can be very specific in targeting areas where you want to, increase damage or do more damage. So it's not a winnable situation from the point of view of the Israelis or the Americans. So I think this ceasefire is not going to work. It would be nice if it did, but it has to work. There's no way it will work unless the Americans and the Israelis find some way to guarantee the Iranians that they're going to be left alone in the future. If I were Iranian, my attitude would simply be what I believe the Iranian attitudes are. My attitude would be, well, I have time. I have an infinite amount of time at this point. I have enough drones to keep going as long as I want to. I can, I have thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of these things. If I don't have thousands, I will have thousands, because I can build them very fast. Ballistic missiles are a little harder to build on short notice, but I can still build significant numbers of ballistic missiles as I'm going along. And I'm surely getting help from the Russians and Chinese. And so my capacity to build, if there are limitations on it now, those limitations are going to become less so. They're going to be smaller and less problematic. And the Russians have a big incentive to provide help to the Iranians, if nothing else, because the Israelis have made it clear to the Americans that you give all these missiles to Ukraine, and then they're your missiles that are being used to attack us in Russia, and we're not going to put up with it. And the Russians clearly made it very clear that if the situation comes up where the Russians can help someone attack American interests, they will help. They made it very clear. So the idea that all of a sudden someone's surprised that the Russians are doing this is ridiculous. I mean, and things are going to get a lot worse in Ukraine because there's no munitions for Ukraine now either. You can't ship things you don't have, and that's going on in Ukraine now. All of the vectors point in the wrong way from the American point of view, and Trump, even in his dim-witted understanding of the world, has to see that. There's evidence that he does see it. Now, he's a megalomaniac. He's probably suffering from some kind of dementia, if not, it may be stress-related, but it could be dementia too. It could be a physical, just because of his age, which is my age, incidentally. So maybe I'm going to be suffering from dementia next.
But you're bright.
But he's got Netanyahu there, who's just as crazy as he is, but in a different way. But still, Netanyahu has no interest in helping out Trump, none at all. He will use Trump and throw him away if he can. His problem is simply that he needs Trump, and he can't go too far over the edge and get a reaction from Trump. But Trump, on the other hand, is owned by the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee, this AIPAC, and these ultra-wealthy Jews who are ultra. I don't like using Zionism as a word, but I think it's correct. The ultra nationalists who are willing to literally murder all kinds of innocent people, families, and children, and forget about women and men. But I mean, it's just horrifying, this attitude these people have. And given that they have this attitude and they have a lot of money and can influence in a dramatic way the political decision making in the United States, we have an American political system that prioritizes Israeli ideas about what Israeli security is over American ideas about what American security should be. I mean, what we are doing now, we the Americans are now doing, is definitely not in our national security interest. We're alienating all our allies. We're expending munitions that if you want to argue you have legitimate defense needs, we're using it all up on by giving it to these absolutely maniacal Israelis who are using it to bomb innocent civilians. This is not in the American interest, and it's against Judeo-Christian ethics, which incidentally, from my friends' relations with people who are Muslims, and I do have a bunch of friends who are Muslims, is not very different from from the Muslim principles of being moral and kind and generous. So it's just it contradicts all of the moral values of everybody, whatever their religious backgrounds are, and yet we're doing it. We are co-belligerents, and so I don't see how this thing is going to persist. I hope I'm wrong, but when I say I hope I'm wrong, I mean I am inferring that this problem of Iran being constantly attacked, both economically and militarily, will be solved. So, if I'm wrong, and there's a ceasefire that continues, and Iran gets the reasonable uh, um, objectives, achieves the reasonable objectives that it's aiming at, fine. I think that's good for everybody, good for the world. If the Israelis don't like it, tough luck. That's you're a small country. You survive because the Americans have this fantastic preoccupation with funding you and supporting you. You have behaved in a criminal way. The country has behaved in a criminal way, and it's about time for you to fess up and start acting like a member of the world community who's responsible. So I don't think that's going to happen. I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong, but I don't think that's going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, we're going to be back at it again. The Iranians are going to be back at it. So that's my best guess of what's going on now, of what the situation is.
There are reports, Ted, that they're talking about the United States is preparing for a massive attack on Iran for days. And they're talking about, because the United States was sending a lot of weapons. The reports, over 75 U.S. logistic flights into the Gulf since the ceasefire started. So, from what has happened so far militarily, what are they seeking for if that happens? Because
I don't know what they're going to bomb. They're going to bomb more hospitals. They're going to bomb more girls' schools. I mean, what do these people think they're doing? The real military capacity of Iran right now is all in underground tunnels. There is no way of getting at those underground tunnels. I've studied tunnels because I think I mentioned that I was on this weird Department of Energy committee that looked at this in the 80s, well before there was any issue of Iran or not, the focus of it. It's just a general preoccupation with, we have all these other people out there, they have tunnels. We want to be able to threaten them. And it was just ridiculous. There was no technology that could be found. There was a lot of wasted American taxpayer dollars and ridiculous studies that I criticized to the point they threw me off the committee. but there's no way to get at the tunnels. And Iran has done a spectacular engineering job. It's been deeply thought through. Every time I see one of these photographs, I say, wow, these guys knew what they're doing. And you're not going to be able to destroy these tunnels given the people who built them knew what they were doing. It's just no way around it. And as long as they have these tunnels, they can manufacture things inside them. They can continue storing anything they manufacture. They can continue launching missiles, and you can attack the exits, and then they can then launch the missile again later. It's just, you have no way of stopping them. So from the Iranian point, I don't know what this massive attack is going to do. I have no idea what you're going to tunnel, unless you're going to just do more general murder of innocent civilians and attack more universities. And, attacking universities, gee whiz, schools, what do you think you're doing? You're trying to win a war, or you're trying to destroy the society you're going up against. That's that has there's no moral defense of this. There's no way to morally argue for this. So I don't know if there's a new attack being planned. The evidence certainly points to it, but I don't know what they're going to attack. What are they going to say? We're going to just continue destroying your hospitals, your schools, your and hope that you'll be upset enough about it that you'll stop. That's not going to stop the Iranians. They realize that they're in a fight for their life, and they'll eat the pain. They're tough people. They've been through a lot. They have thousands of years of civilization that they're very proud of. I mean, I have some Iranian friends. They're very proud of their civilization. That's important because that's part of the culture, the mindset. You're not going to push these people over the edge to a surrender. No way. So all you're going to do is kill more people, expend more munitions, and you're going to have no effect. Well, the effect you're likely to have is the Iranians will double down yet further on keeping up the pressure in the form of these ballistic missile and drone attacks. Seems to me that that's the natural thing they'll do.
Yeah.
So
The other point, Ted, which is part of your work and you understand well when it comes to those, is the use of nukes and nuclear weapons and the threat of using nuclear weapons. The basic, this war started on this understanding, and Donald Trump keep saying that we want to get rid of, Iran was going, he was attacking the Pope. He said that Pope doesn't understand. We attacked Iran because Iran was on the verge of producing nuclear weapons. That's why we attacked Iran.
I think the president, I caught this. You have to correct me now. I thought the president was now saying there are no more nuclear weapons to worry about. Didn't he just switch on this one?
Yeah.
Either there are nuclear weapons to worry about or there aren't. I mean, what's he talking about? Am I right?
Yeah.
I think I heard that the other day. I've been traveling, so I just got off a plane just yesterday.
He literally is talking about that Iran was building nuclear weapons, that I attacked them and they destroyed everything. Right now that's because of the attack we could achieve everything with the attack.
Yes.
And the Pope doesn't understand that. That's why he has picked a fight with the Pope. He said, if I wasn't the president of the United States, you wouldn't be in your position. It's amazing, the whole case of Donald Trump. But considering go ahead.
No. I mean, it's just there isn't a religious leader in the world this guy hasn't infuriated.
Exactly.
You could, it doesn't matter who you talk to. Jews. The progressive Jews, Catholics, Islamic people, Muslims. It's incredible. He's just Anyway, he's all of his political support is nearly gone. I mean, he's only got a very, very low percentage of people supporting him. And the congressional elections are unpredictable, but I don't rule out that the Democrats will retake the Senate along with the House. The House, to me, there's nothing to talk about. It's going to be a landslide. They're going to lose. The Republicans are going to lose a tremendous amount in the House. But if they lose the Senate too, which is less of a clear outcome, that will really be bad for the Trump presidency, because I think he will be impeached by this new, if the House and Senate go, and he may escape the consequences of impeachment, but I'm not so sure these days, because people are pretty fed up, and he's got his own MAGA people, the Make America Great Again crowd. They are surprisingly committed to their principles. I mean, I don't agree with much of what MAGA argues for, but I have to give them credit for standing by their principles. And their principles included no more wars, no more spending of national treasure on wars that get us nowhere and just impoverish us and cause us to lose ability to work in the world. And they're angry about that, and good for them. Again, I could disagree with people, but I'm I am a person who believes strongly that you should respect people's views, unless they're talking hatred or bigotry or violence. Then I can't go along with that. But if you're talking something that I basically disagree with, well, I'm an American citizen. If you're an American citizen and you have this view, I'll debate it with you, and I may ultimately not come to agreement with you, but I'm not going to hate you. I'm not going to treat you as a criminal unless you're arguing for criminal things. So that's my attitude toward American citizens that I'm in debate with or I deal with. And I don't like this business of saying this person is a MAGA person and hence they're unethical, they're monstrous, they have different judgments about certain things than I do. I don't agree with those judgments, but we're citizens when we're trying to navigate our way to build a country that's just and fair to a large number of people, and we don't have that country. I mean, if I look at, for example, China's leadership, it's an autocratic state. But so if I have a home and the Chinese want to build a highway that would go through where my home was, I don't have all kinds of options to stop them. It's just I would in the United States. I may not succeed, but I can do that. The autocratic state they'll give me money and they'll give me what they think is a fair amount of money. I know this for a fact because I was in China talking to people who were in this situation. I had some former students of mine. I asked them to take me out into the Chinese countryside. I wanted to see Chinese people, and they took me to a place where the people were all going to be moved out, and they weren't afraid of the government. They were belly aching about it. They didn't say they wouldn't obey the government. They didn't question the government's right to do it, but they spoke freely, and they were being paid some money, and they were being provided alternative homes, and they didn't like it, but the country is an autocracy, and it could do it. On the other hand, the autocracy, the leadership, is aiming at raising everybody's economic and opportunity in the country. Making everybody, helping everybody live a better life. That's the objective. And you look at things that the autocracy does. I mean, it arbitrarily raises the amount of money, the salaries of everybody, because it wants to. It says we've reached a point now where we should raise salaries so that people have more money to buy consumer items. That wasn't what happened in the United States here. What happened in the United States is we passed a bill that gave all the people who needed no more money, all these billionaires, more money at the cost of people's health services, the cost of people's security, financial security. And that's not a government that's doing the best for its people. So you can tell me, oh, we're better because we're free, whatever that means. I don't know what free means in this case. I mean, I'm free in the sense that nobody's going to come and knock down the door of my home and come in and beat me up and arrest me. However, I'm educated and I'm white. If I were not white, let me tell you, I have friends who are black. I don't say this. I have real friends who are black over many, and they don't feel that way, and they are right. There is the evidence to show that. So what's all this stuff about freedom versus autocracy? It's just ridiculous. I mean, there are differences. I prefer my society to living in China if that were my choice, but I'm not Chinese. I'm not a product of their culture. I don't speak their language. I have great regard for their culture and them, but the United States is my home. I'm an American, and as I joke with all my foreign friends, I'm an American redneck. So, but this has nothing to do with freedom and democracy and versus autocracy, this nonsense that this guy Mike McFaul spouts all the time. I mean, it's ridiculous. He runs a center that's not free at all. He runs a center that's an academic shithole. I mean, literally. I mean, there's no way to carry on an open debate in this place, but he's for freedom. I mean, I've never seen anything so repressive in all my career in an American academic institution. But he's for freedom. So anyway, that's the situation we're in.
Yeah.
Yes.
You may go to the second part of our discussion.
Yes. So, I was about to say, speaking of freedom and academic integrity, I had quite an experience on my trip from Germany on the airplane, because the airplanes now have reasonably good internet support, and you can get into. And so I'm sitting there, and the first thing I get is an article that was just published by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists that if I want to be, it was so inaccurate that it wasn't even wrong. I mean, it was just completely without merit. And of course, a day later, I'll show you this in some slides. So a day later, I get I get an email explaining to me how the Bulletin is this source of expert scientific information, and give them money. You should give them money, and because they are real expertise, and they are informing our society about the critical national security issues that we should all be concerned about. So it's quite an interesting set of issues that have come up. Let me. Why don't you just show the slide number 1? Okay, so there are serious errors and misinformation in this Bulletin of Atomic Scientists article about a false alert that occurred in 1995 in Russia. It was an alert. I'll discuss it in some detail depending on how much time we have. And the article said nothing correct about this false alert, nothing. And it provided no information about what the false alert was. Instead, it had all kinds of discussions about how this false alert occurred when Chechnya, when the Russians were losing a war in Chechnya, how the Russian economic downturn, all of these things that had nothing at all to do with this false alert were somehow rolled into this article as somehow being associated with the false alert. It was just amazing. It was a totally amazing fabrication of irrelevant things that may have occurred at the same time, but had nothing to do with the false alert. It was just remarkable. Now, in all fairness, I want to take a moment to point out that this article was written by 2 very young, very junior people. I won't talk much about them, but I'm a little concerned, quite honestly, because they did such a bad job. I feel bad for them because these people are young scholars, and you could argue they should have known better. But my first question is, since I'm an educator, is how did their supervisors or the people they deal with let them do this? What was the role? I mean, one of them's from Princeton.
They're working for some sort of NGOs. That's why.
Well, maybe, but one of them is from Princeton, the Science and Global Security program there, which if you look at my my Google profile, it falsely states that I was thrown out of the program there. In fact, I resigned from the program after the program did something that was unethical scholarly thing I could talk about. And so I resigned in protest, even though I was 30 years on the board of this program. So it wasn't as presented in I'd have to spend all my time correcting these false statements that get into, get into, Wikipedia. It's really disturbing. But anyway, this article was simply ridiculous. And let's go to slide 2. So the article was erroneous. It was published on April 13. The next slide shows you what I received on April 14, the day after. Dear Ted, in a world facing escalating nuclear risk, accelerating climate disruption, and rapidly advancing technology, having access to clear and credible information has never been more essential. The Bulletin is known for authoritative science-based journalism, and our online and in-person programming complements our coverage to unpack complex, urgent issues. Yet this article is totally, like I said, it's not even wrong. It doesn't even come close to being wrong. But we're not done yet. To power this work and advance meaningful solutions, we need an all-hands-on-deck effort. You can help strengthen this movement. So this is what I get a day after I get this article that is totally misleading, filled with false information. Let's go to slide 4. Here's just the beginning of the article as mocked up. The article has this lavish photograph, which you see below. The photograph, this is the first thing you see in the article. The photograph says the rocket, it's talking about this rocket which caused this false alert. The rocket carried instruments about 200 miles, 320 kilometers into the atmosphere. That's not correct at all. It's simply wrong. This rocket was on a very high trajectory. It went up to almost 1,400 kilometers high. It was a very distortedly high. That's the relevant piece of information about this trajectory, because the Russians had never seen a rocket launched from this particular location that went so high. So what caused the alert was the fact that the rocket went so high relative to anything they had seen earlier. It had nothing to do with it traveling laterally by 200 miles. I mean, it's totally misleading. So if we go to slide 4, you just see it slightly blown up. And slightly five, I'm sorry. So, all right. So this is an article by the Bulletin. Now let me re-summarize the claims. You go to the Bulletin, give them money. In fact, incidentally, I was told that I shouldn't write for. I'm not acceptable as a writer for the Bulletin a few years ago, so I stopped writing for them. I would have stopped anyway because of these articles. You're told give them money because these are the guys who are holding the truth, and they're scientists, they're experts, and because they're scientists and experts, they're giving you information that helps you be a responsible citizen of the world and the United States, and yet nothing in this article is correct about what caused this alert. They're talking about weird things like I had some notes here too. I wrote to myself. I mean, it was so weird I can't even recall all the details. They talk about. They show a complete misunderstanding of satellite early warning systems. They talk about things about constraints on providing launch information about about your missiles because of what they call queuing, that the satellites would use. There's no way the satellites would use queuing. The satellites are designed to survey the whole Earth. You're not cued. If someone tells you there's going to be a launch and you have a satellite that can look at the whole Earth like the United States has, you see it. You see the launch. You don't need to be cued to it. You just see the launch because you're surveying the whole Earth. It's ridiculous. Why would queuing be an issue to you? It's just everything is fabricated, showing a complete absence of understanding the most basic facts about how early warning systems function, and then using these misstated facts to come up with proposals which are totally ridiculous. So this is really, but all right. So this is an art. Remember now, good. This is a good slide. Remember now, this is a journal. It has an editor. His name is John Mecklin. The editor decides what's published. The editor has a responsibility to determine whether or not an article is accurate. Even a newspaper article goes through some level of review. If you, at least you're trying to get a date right, and so I just, out of curiosity, I did a Google search. I just said to myself, what if I were going to write an article about this, and I knew nothing about it? So I asked the question of Google, what was the cause of the Russian false alert in 1995? Well, I won't go through the details here, but basically the Google search gives all of the right answers. In other words, if you looked up the Google, if you just did a Google search, you would have gotten information that was reasonably accurate. There's some minor details that are not quite, but I'm an expert in this. I've spent years working on this particular problem. You get also references to articles. You see on the right, you see Norwegian rocket incident, Wikipedia. The Wikipedia article is very comprehensive. You get a Union of Concerned Scientists article. You get an article that I co-authored from over, it must be 25 years ago, False Alarm Nuclear Danger by Jeff Forden, Pavel Podvig, and Theodore Postol. All you have to do is read these articles and you'd know everything you needed to know, at a reasonably competent level about how this false alert occurred. You got nothing. If you believed anything this article from the Bulletin was saying, you would have gotten, you would have no idea what you were talking about, and you'd be wrong in things that you talked about and proposed. It's that striking. So if you want to see how striking this is, in the next slide, I just show you the Wikipedia. It goes on for quite a ways, but you can see an image of the rocket that was launched. You can see a map, with none of which are in this article from the Bulletin, showing you the launch point. And if you read this and you took it seriously, you would know infinitely more than the authors of the article know, because it's clear they don't understand all of these basic facts of information. They didn't even check Wikipedia, and now to emphasize this further, if we go to the next slide, this is from the Wikipedia article. I won't go through this, but this shows you articles you could look up that talk about this false alert. And why would you write an article and show no knowledge, not even a basic knowledge of how satellites function, when the issue has to do with early warning satellites, and publish an article? And how would the editor of the journal, Mr. Mecklin, who claims to be an expert himself, incidentally, he's not my favorite person, so I'll use my own language. He's technically illiterate. His word is worthless. I dealt with him as an editor. He would tell you one thing and do another. He would try to mislead you when he was editing an article. I mean, this is not, I've never dealt with an editor who did this before. This guy's unique. And then he publishes this article, which was clearly not even a child could have fact checked this article and found it was just nonsense. A child. You get a bright high school student who knows how to use, ChatGPT or something, and you would know that this article was nonsense. This is the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. It's telling you what that it's an expert organization. It's touting itself as a scientific national security source of wisdom, and it's publishing total nonsense. If you go to slide 9, it's just an image from another article that I had written about this 10 years ago. But slide 10 gives you some points that I want to make. First of all, what is the problem and how can it be solved at the Bulletin? The Bulletin has a long history. I was writing for the Bulletin over 40 years ago. At that time, there were serious people involved in overseeing the Bulletin. Now it's a social club. It's a social club of people who are telling themselves they're good people. They know better than you and I. And they're going to tell us how to manage the world and do good things to keep the world from being destroyed by nuclear war or climate change, another issue I'll mention briefly. So point number 1 is this article is only one example of articles that are routinely published by the Bulletin, where the scientific accuracy and its contents are in error or completely without merit. This is only one article. I could come up with zillions of articles. And I'm going to try to talk to the board of the Bulletin. So I'm saying this publicly. If I don't talk to the board of the Bulletin, it's not because I'm not willing to. It's because they're not willing to talk to me. I'm a scientist of some repute, and I think I can tell them things that they should want to know. So I'm planning to talk to the board. We'll see if that happens. You can ask me about it sometime in the future. All right, the Bulletin, I know for a fact that the Bulletin has no process for reviewing articles, none. Now, any journal that purports to be a scientific journal has an extensive review process. And the reason you do that is even if you're an expert, you want another expert. I've always endured. In fact, the reason I was told to go, that they will not, that the editor, Mr. Mecklin, will never, doesn't want me to deal with, doesn't want to deal with me ever again, was because I was insisting that he get an article he didn't want to publish reviewed. Then it turned out he lied to me. Incidentally, I have all the emails, so anybody who wants them. He lied to me about the review process because he didn't get reviewers. And then he tried to claim that the review process was secret. Now, this is such a joke, it's hard to... The review process, the identity of the referee is generally kept from the author for obvious reasons, but you don't keep the review secret. The review has to be. In fact, I resigned from the Princeton group because I found out that they had reviewed they had used a slanderous letter against me that was secretly sent to them against me and the article I was trying to publish, and that they had never told me about the letter and never informed me about them using it for their review. I said, if you're going to do this, you are violating the principles of refereeing. This article contained amazing statements about me. For example, I was a Holocaust denier. I actually got a hold of this letter. A Holocaust denier. So So this piece of garbage who wrote, and they looked at it, they treated this letter as if it was serious. Keep in mind that I was on the board of editors. I wasn't, I mean, it has to be separated in this case because I was publishing in the same journal. I was on the board of editors for 30 years. The three editors who were involved in this case were all former students of mine. Now, let me tell you, Nima, I ever get a letter telling me that Nima is a, whatever. I don't care what it tells me. If I ever get a letter that's being circulated behind your back, I promise you that you will be the first person to receive a copy of it. That's not appropriate. It's not appropriate to keep slander behind a person's back secret. Someone's writing secret letters behind your back. I don't care if it's true. You have a right to know about it. Yeah. So this is the kind of outrageous behavior I've been subjected to by the Bulletin and actually the Princeton group too. And of course, one of the authors is from Princeton, so from the Princeton group. So anyway, let's go back to slide 10. All right. Let me make a point here. I've also done a lot of work on climate change. I haven't talked about it. That's another discussion. But I know quite a bit about climate change, the scientific foundations of climate change. I can tell you that the articles on climate change in the Bulletin are almost always nonsense or outright misinformation. Okay, and I have tried to make that point to Mr. Mecklin, because I was trying to say to him, why don't you get referees involved? You're worried about climate change? Fine. Have some people who know something about the science reviewing articles that you publish instead of publishing any piece of garbage by somebody who has a concern that's based on their ignorance. They write the articles are typically a concern that's based on the ignorance of the individual writing it. I don't understand why the weather is what it is today. It must be climate change. It's incredible. So this Bulletin is telling you, as you would see from the letter I showed you, they're telling you about nuclear safety and nuclear war and climate change, and none of it is backed up by any form of academic expertise reviewing these articles. They're just what Mr. Mecklin decides he wants to publish without oversight from any other parts of the Bulletin. So this deals with the Bulletin as a science advisory committee. I don't know what they do. They don't do anything. I wrote the science advisory committee a few years ago before they threw me out. And I said, you're not publishing accurate information on climate change. Here's some articles that you ought to be aware of. I sent them articles. These are refereed scientific journal articles. And I got a letter back. Well, I got a letter back from the guy who was then the chair, this guy, Bob Rosner, who's distinguished professor of public policy at university. He's distinguished. I can't find any articles by this guy on public policy. None. But he's a distinguished. And he writes back, well, I talked to some of my friends and they don't agree. Well, I'm a scientist. You're supposed to be a scientist. What do you mean, your friends? What do they not agree with? So that's the Science Advisory Committee. So they do have some people. They do have some potential scholars, some scholars who have potential to be reviewers. But if you're going to review an article that's not inside your field of activity, you have to do some work. You have the training, if you're a well-trained scientist, you can, a lot of the things I've talked about, over the few years I've been doing things on the web are things I learned about. I'm a well-trained scientist. I can go and look something up. I can very quickly understand it because I have all the technical foundation to understand something that would take a person without the training a long time to understand. And it's good for me, frankly, because it broadens my understanding of all kinds of issues that I should know about, although, we all have limits on our time and energy. And at the same time, I'm able to translate this stuff into solid, understandable technical discussions that the public can absorb and thereby help the public make more informed decisions for themselves. In other words, my objective is to help people understand enough of the basic, accurate facts that they can then decide for themselves what the different policy alternatives could make sense. I'm not here to tell you what to think. That's my position. I'm here to help you understand the issues, and it's your job as a citizen of the world and of your country to think it through and decide what you believe, given your values and the values you think your country should be emphasizing, how you're going to deal with a given set of problems. That's what I try to do. So anyway, that's the situation with the article. Do I have a few minutes to talk on?
Yeah, we have. Yeah.
Okay, so let's take a jump and talk about what this event actually was, because it is a very interesting event. Let's jump to slide 29. Okay, this is the Russian experience, the false alert of January 25. If we go to the next slide, anybody who had put real energy into understanding this alert, which I did, would have asked the question, why didn't the dog bark? This sounds like what happened is a rocket. Let's go to slide 31. A rocket was launched. This was a 4-stage rocket. I won't spend a lot of time talking about this rocket, but if we go to slide 35, we would see this is the powered flight profile of the rocket. And basically what happened is, if you look at the above 50 kilometers, so you look at the set of points above 50 kilometers out to maybe 100 kilometers altitude, what happened is you had a third rocket stage. The first 2 rocket stages burnt out below 50 kilometers. Bear in mind, this is a scientific rocket. So the guys who build a rocket, they're scrounging for pieces of rocket motors so they can put something up to high altitudes for an ionospheric experiment at a cost that they can afford, because they can't pick up the phone like Lockheed does and say, build me this rocket stage. So they scrounged a couple of stages from old surface-to-air missiles just to boost the thing up. And then they had a NASA rocket stage to propel the payload between roughly 52 or 53 kilometers up to an altitude of roughly maybe 100 kilometers before a 4th stage began burning. Well, it turns out that if you go to slide 36, if you look at the burnout events associated with a Trident II or Trident I ballistic missile, there are events, I won't go into details, that you can see on a radar, a long-range early warning radar, that you would not see. You would see, you could recognize, but you could not tell. You can't see in detail. So, for example, you see the rocket motor burning because the rocket motor plume has a radar reflection. When the rocket motor turns off, all of a sudden the plume disappears. You can still see the rocket. You can't see. You see a blob. A point of light is the rocket, but you know that the rocket plume was burning to a certain altitude, and then it turns off. Well, does that look like a rock? How do I classify this rocket? Well, maybe it's a Trident II, because when I see this thing, I don't see the lower stages because the curvature of the Earth stops me from seeing them. But I see this upper stage, and it turns off at an altitude that's associated with a Trident II, first stage burn. Well, if this is an early warning radar, this is not a good thing. I mean, I'm not exactly happy seeing this event. So if I go to slide 37, this shows you the full trajectory of this rocket. The little red curve you see below is just is one of the lower stages, which I see with the radar. Now, the radar is looking. Unfortunately, I don't have. Let's go to slide 40. Slide 40 shows the fan of the particular radar that detected the launch. So what the radar saw was a rocket motor that turned off. Couldn't see anything else at an altitude that could have been a Trident ballistic missile. Now, why would this cause an alert? Well, the reason it could cause an alert is if we go to slide 44, my concern would be that at the apogee, if this were a Trident missile, I would be detonating a nuclear weapon. And the nuclear weapon would cause an ionized layer in the ionosphere, and the radar would be blinded. It would be as if I took a metallized blanket and threw it over the radar. So now the radar can't see beyond this layer of ionized air at high altitudes. So the net result is I'm basically blind. So if we go to slide, I'm sorry here. If we go to slide 55, the radar is looking out, and there's a layer of ionized air. You see it at 50 kilometers. You see a slightly flat but curved hatched area. That shows you the area, the volume of sky that the nuclear detonation has ionized. And beyond that region of sky, the radar cannot see. The radar is blocked. And so if I go to the next slide, this means that the radar cannot see ballistic missiles that are coming in from the North Atlantic. So the purpose of detonating a nuclear weapon at high altitude in close would be to blind the radar so it cannot see the developing attack that it would otherwise see, because it could see longer range before the nuclear detonation occurred. Now, this is a crazy attack. I want to be very clear. But it's an attack that both the United States and the Russians have worried about. The only reason, this is a very esoteric thing. You'd ask, how the hell do I know about it? Well, it's because I studied nuclear war. I studied nuclear war inside the Pentagon, and I did my own calculations because I wanted to understand what I was doing. And so when I saw this, I knew immediately that the Russian response was due to the danger of this unknown rocket being part of a precursor nuclear attack on Russia. That's what the system was responding to. I gave a talk at a Stanford seminar sometime after I had begun to analyze this. And in the audience was a colonel general, retired, who had been commander of the Moscow Early Warning Center. Lovely man. I got to know him quite well. And he says, "Ted, you figured it out." It's Russian. He says, "This is exactly what we were always worried about when we were in, So now the natural question that I asked is, well, why, let's go back to slide 56. Why didn't the Russian early warning satellites see the launch of these submarine-launched ballistic missiles in the North Atlantic? And the answer turned out, after enormous amounts of work, that the Russian satellites are unable to look directly down at the Earth. There's this technical discussion about why that's the case, and we can't do it here for now, but I mean, if people are enough interested, it could be a subject for further elaboration, because it's a very interesting problem. But the Russians had not solved the problem of looking down at the Earth, which the United States had solved. Incidentally, they still have not solved this problem, which is a great surprise to me. So the Russians have no satellite system that could tell them that they're under attack from the North Atlantic. The warning of attack from the North Atlantic they have is from their radars. So tampering with those radars, like the Ukrainians tried to do in Armavir, there was a radar looking south in that case into the Indian Ocean, attacking those radars or tampering with it could precipitate a high level of alert in the Russian warning system, because the Russians would say, why is this happening? Who's doing it? I don't know that drone is American, that closed the radar down, or if it's Ukrainian, or, this is how I got into this strange internet business that I'm now in, because what happened is I was so disturbed when the Ukrainians attacked this radar, this Russian early warning radar, that I started writing people like Jeffrey Sachs to try to get them to alert the appropriate, because I knew Sachs has contacts at the White House. And I knew from my earlier experience with the American intelligence community that people in the White House did not know anything about their own early warning system and did not understand the limitations in the Russian early warning system. I was involved. There's a whole interesting story there where I discovered this. I was asked by the Clinton administration to review what the Americans knew about the Russian early warning system, because the Clinton administration was thinking about early warning cooperation with the Russians. And when I reviewed the code word documents, I was stunned to find out that the American intelligence system did not know that the Russian early warning satellite system could not look down at the surface of the Earth and see launches. That's important, because an American president in a crisis could think, well, the Russians are doing this. They must know that we know. Why are they, they must know we're attacking them. We need to do something. This could literally lead to a misunderstanding that could result in massive nuclear use of nuclear weapons by the United States and Russia. This is a serious intelligence shortfall. And when I discovered this, I was working with a bunch of Russians, and I said to myself, this is too serious to not tell the Russians that I have figured this out. So I went to Moscow. I didn't know if I was going to be arrested. I'll be honest with you, because this was not exactly, this was a secret that was one of the most closely guarded secrets in Russia. It had to be. I know how we would have dealt with it. Americans, how we would have dealt with this. We were keeping, when we first launched our early warning satellites, we didn't even acknowledge that we were trying to do this. It was secret. The fact that we were trying to do it was secret. And I went to Russia and I gave a talk. And sitting in the audience, God bless him, was Anatoly Savin. He's dead now, and so I can use his. I wouldn't normally. And Anatoly was the chief designer of the Russian early warning satellite system. Now, I was sitting there giving this talk to a group of people in an organization called Komieta. Komieta is a giant government-run and owned organization, which is the equivalent of Lockheed, Raytheon, everyone else combined, but owned by the government, which is the right way to do it. You don't want these guys deciding what's good for your national security like we do. So he's head of this thing. He's been decorated multiple times for his work during the Great Patriotic War and otherwise. He's a serious communist. I mean, he and we had a very good relationship. For some reason, he just took a liking to me. And so I would joke with him about it, a serious man though. And he's sitting there and he says, Ted, you got the surveillance areas in your analysis. The shape is wrong. The shape is wrong. Well, what he told me is how the scanning system worked, because I knew there were two possible shapes for the areas that I believed they were looking at, which were very limited. It wasn't the global system. So there's no question, none at all, that Savin knew exactly what he was doing. He was telling me, you're right. And the reason he was telling me, you're right, is he understood that what I was trying to do was start a cooperative program. I was going to the Americans and saying, this is not good for American security as well as Russian security. If the Russians accidentally attack us because they think they're under attack, the United States is destroyed just as well as Russia. So it's in the American national security interest to try to help the Russians solve this problem. And I've been working on this problem 25 years and getting nowhere. So this is an issue. So when I see this bulletin article, and they're telling everybody they're such experts, they've already told me, you're verboten, you're dirt. We don't want to talk to you again. We don't want you dirtying up our club. I felt that, it's important that people be alerted to this. And I hope if you have audience members who read the bulletin, and I suspect you do, because you have a pretty highly informed crowd, they should write letters about this particular discussion we're now having. They should write letters to the bulletin and demand that they do a proper job, or cease and desist, just close down and don't falsely represent yourself as an organization that's giving people accurate information. You are not doing it. You are lying. You are misrepresenting yourself as experts on matters that you have no knowledge of. And that is immoral. It's also dangerous. If I tell you, I know that bridge is okay, but in fact, the bridge is not, and it's going to fall down, I am immoral telling you to go ahead and use the bridge. And that's what these people are doing. This is immorality on a massive scale. And the bulletin needs to correct its act. That's my bottom line for this discussion.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ted. As always, we're grateful for everything you do.
Well, I hope this gets a lot of views, not because of me, but because of the content.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing as always. And thank you so much, Ted.
Thank you. Now I'm going to go to sleep because I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.